What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2024 schedule preview and projected record series. The NC State Wolfpack up next, coming off of a pretty good season. Let's look at their schedule from last year. They did lose to Notre Dame, Louisville, and Duke. Played Notre Dame in the non-conference, which of course is, it's a non-conference game, but they have the agreement with the ACC. They also played UConn on the road. Some people thought that might be a tricky game for them. UConn, not a bad team. They played VMI and then Marshall. So outside of Notre Dame, didn't really have too much of a challenge in the non-conference. They did not have to play Florida State last season. They did play Clemson and they did play Louisville. So it was a pretty balanced schedule. We look at the schedule for this year and let's break it down first. Let's look at the non-conference. They'll play Western Carolina, Tennessee. That game will be in Charlotte. And they'll play Louisiana Tech and Northern Illinois. So it's very similar to last year. 3 pretty easy games and then 1 challenging game in the non-conference. Just change out Tennessee or change Notre Dame to Tennessee. All right, the home schedule, again, those 3 non-conference games just mentioned. Wake Forest, Syracuse, Stanford, and Duke. NC State's got a really good chance to go undefeated at home. This is not a tough schedule at all. So you're talking about potentially 7 wins right there. Not even talking about the road game. So that is good news. We look at the road schedule. It's not horrible, really. You do have that Tennessee game, again, neutral site game. At Clemson, obviously a very tough place to play. All the way across the country to play California, at Georgia Tech, and at North Carolina. But again, this is not horrible. They don't play Louisville. They don't play Florida State. They don't even play Miami. Again, they lucked out with the schedule. This is a very, very favorable schedule in the ACC. So they'll start with Western Carolina on August 29th. That'll be the Thursday night of that opening week, whatever. Tennessee on the 7th, again in Charlotte. Louisiana Tech on September 14th. Then they play at Clemson September 21st. Obviously going to be a really tough game there. Then a tough place to play, of course. Northern Illinois on September 28th. Then they'll play Wake Forest on October 5th. And then back home again for Syracuse on October 12th. But what do you notice here? We're all the way to October 19th, and they have not had their first bye week. They will get it after they play at California. And this is at least the second team I've noticed when looking at these schedules where the ACC teams, after going to California, they have had a bye week the next week, which is interesting. You can do that. But you can't do it on the other side because Cal and Stanford, they're going to have to go across the country 4 times. So you can't put a bye week after all those games. So maybe a little bit of a disadvantage there for Cal and Stanford. And I don't know if they did that for every team that goes on the road to play them. And again, I just noticed that a couple times. And interestingly enough, after Cal, they play Stanford, but that'll be at home on November 2nd after that first bye week. Then they play Duke. That game will be at home on the 9th. And then it's on the road at Georgia Tech after their second bye week. So they have a bye week, 2 games, then another bye week, and they'll play Georgia Tech on a Thursday night game on the road, and then North Carolina to close things out. So that kind of works out to where, you don't have a short week. You've got a bye week before that weeknight game, and so that's favorable as well. There's just a lot to like about this schedule if you're an NC State fan. Tennessee, of course, will be tough in the non-conference. Clemson on the road, that'll be really tough, but they realistically could win every other game on this schedule. And I'm not saying they can't beat Tennessee or Clemson, but let's just say they don't. They could realistically win every other game on this schedule. And they could lose several games as well, but it gives them a chance. NC State is definitely a contender into the ACC if they're a good team, if nothing else, just because of this schedule. Obviously, if they wind up dropping off a lot, they'll lose several games. But if they're similar to how they were last year with the schedule, yeah, they're a very serious contender. So let's look at the projections from last year before we get to the 2024 projections. Of course, they were 9-3 in the regular season. They were 8-4. Our projection was 8-4, so missed by 1 game. Even though I predicted them to go 6-6, Athlon predicted them to go 7-5, and the over/under was at 6.5. So the projection was actually closer than anything else. Again, it'll be the same formula that we use to do this projection that I'm about to show you. But if you go back to last year, I said that I felt like NC State or Pittsburgh, one of those teams was going to be a big disappointment, and I just couldn't figure out which team it was, and I got it wrong. And obviously Pitt was worse than 6-6, but I just felt like one of those teams, it was weird just looking at their rosters and everything. I just felt like one of those teams was going to disappoint. And again, it wound up being Pittsburgh, not NC State. NC State had a very solid season. So let's get to the projections. This is a scale that we use. Less than 20 over 80. Those are games that are counted pretty much as guaranteed wins or losses. 20 to 29, 71 to 80, games where I think the spread will be double digits. 10 to 16 maybe in that range. 30 to 39, 61 to 70, games where I think the spread will be about a touchdown. 6, 7, 8, 9 points. And then the 40 to 60, those are your 50-50 games. Games that really could go either way, and games where I think the spread will be, less than 6 or 7. If we're talking a field goal, 3, 4, 5 points in that range. So we'll start with the easy wins, and they get 3 of them. So, I mean, we've done several ACC teams already, and most of those teams do not have 3 easy wins. So already a big advantage for NC State. Just don't really see them having any trouble with Western Carolina, Louisiana Tech, or Northern Illinois. So if you get 3 wins right already, that's a good start. And then I think they'll be favored in these games: Wake Forest, Syracuse, Stanford, and Duke by about probably 8 or 9 points, maybe more. It's February when I'm recording this. I think the video will actually be up on March 1st, but it's still very early, and it's hard to know really how good. Wake Forest, they weren't very good last year. Syracuse wasn't very good last year, but they've got a lot of roster changes. Stanford, don't expect a whole lot out of them. Duke was pretty good last year, but they've got a coaching change. So it's very early. I think NC State could wind up being more than a 7 or 8 point favorite in these games. But again, with the formula that we use, the tier system that we use, these teams are all a tier below NC State. That's why these games are in the purple, because they're home games and they're against a team a tier below them. So how about games where they'll be underdogs? I think Tennessee and Clemson, I talked about this earlier. I think Tennessee will be about a touchdown favorite in this game, and I think Clemson will be about a touchdown favorite in that game, just because it's on the road. If this game was at NC State, I would call it a 50-50 game, but on the road, that's why that one winds up in the yellow here. So 2 games that, again, NC State can win, but I think they will clearly be underdogs in. And then that leaves Cal, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina. 3 road games against teams that I think NC State is better than. But because they're on the road, that's why they wind up as 50-50 games. So these are all games, again, that NC State, I believe, is the better team. And I think they're probably going to be favored in all 3 of these games. Kind of watching Georgia Tech, they might actually be pretty good. Could be a borderline top 25 team. If that's the case, then maybe they're underdogs in that game. But overall, I would say they probably will be about a field goal favorite in all 3 of these games. But all 3 of them on the road. That's tough. To win all of those games on the road is going to be tough for NC State. So if they lose one of those and lose to Tennessee and Clemson, they're right back to 9-3. You lose a couple of them, you're at 8-4, and it's a disappointing season. You win them all, get to 10-2, and we're talking about NC State in the playoff conversation. We're talking about NC State as a team that maybe gets to the ACC championship. Probably does if they only have one conference loss to Clemson. So NC State's schedule sets up well for them. What does it give us in the projection? Well, it gives us a projected record of 8-4. So 8-4, the projection here. And again, you've got the 2 games where they're going to be underdogs, 3 50-50 games, 4 games where they're not going to be favored by a ton, and that will tell us that they're probably going to lose 4 games. I think they have a really good chance to do better than that with the schedule. But again, projection for them with our formula is 8-4. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Give me your thoughts on NC State down in the comments below.